it important to know where Michelle was, know that many, many people have done this exact same mistake. And as I look at some of the advanced questions in the neurons group, boy, lickety split, they really do have a struggle with the same problem that she ended up with. So as I go over here and I say, all right, so in her story, she was pretty quick. When she started out, okay, not fair. She had cameras around. She had me living with her for the first few days, and she had nobody else. I mean, her son, but like her job had just ended. She's in the middle of nowhere, like literally middle of South Dakota, nowhere. And she quickly went down to Keto Continuum number 2, which was 20 carbs or less. And I think it was by the end of the first week, she was 2 meals a day. The next thing she says is, I think we should fast. And I put the brakes on. I think that did make the reel somewhere in episode 3 or so, 3 or 4. And we said, no, don't do that. Don't do that. You will be so happy if you just slow down. And the world kind of changed around as the family came back to visit. Several other setbacks happened, but she really stayed the course. As she moved into what I like to call the place where you live here, if you look way over to that slide where it says live here, she really did make it to 16.8 within must have been a week and 10 days, not even 2 weeks, and found that she was doing pretty darn good. Where her little hiccups that were probably new to addressing this in her situation was, if you look carefully under Keto Continuum number 5, she could keep that food in the 8-hour window, but that's because she didn't count gum or the cough drops or a couple of like breath mints. She was a nurse and would wear that mask and just said it's just stinky in there. So I would just I would have lots of breath mints throughout the day. And what I contend is that's one comforting food crutch that I've seen people have a bit of a problem with. So I truly mean that there is no eating, no snacking, no chewing in the 16 hours. You can in the 8 hours. So as she hung out in that zone, really practicing what it was like to not put those in her mouth and not really, what I like to say, comfort herself with those, she moved on to an advanced 16.8 where we started to remove the fat from her coffee. Now, she wasn't much of a coffee drinker at much, so I think at the first part, it was still her figuring out that coffee was not the enemy. And at the same time, she was reaching for a more advanced fast. So each Friday morning, I'm so glad to see all of you back. Thank you. I'm so sorry. So if I look at some of the things that I knew as she was journeying, as she would zoom into our local support group here in Sioux Falls, and that happens every Friday morning. She would watch several of the other people's struggles and then sometimes text me about, that was really helpful. I saw that she's doing what I did. And then a couple of times in the natural order of life, I couldn't make it to a couple of meetings, and I asked her to step in and lead the group. And as we've looked at the number of responses that have come in over the last couple of months, the best part about her journey is people want to do it too. Like, can I be the next Michelle? And I contend that the best thing that did to Michelle wasn't that she got cameras to watch how she did for those 12 weeks, and then, personal attention from me in our support group here, is that she's been being groomed for taking over this support group here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And what that really means is she's about to level up to a place for the long game. It isn't an accident that I want to do practically everything I can to get people to improve their journey by starting a support group that doesn't cost you money, there's a little bit of funds involved. That's why even just paying for half of your keto kits that come off of the website, part of that is I don't want any barriers for the folks who are really trying to start a support group and begin what Michelle has found. Because we're going to advance into what I told her off screen, what happened to her that didn't make the cut. But I really know, especially based on so many of the write-ins for the neurons group, what happened in the background is there are so many people who've had the weight loss stalls, or they've had just a plateau in a lot of things, or they've said, I'm where I want to be. What do I do now? And the biggest kind of subtext for all of that is autophagy. Autophagy is what they're asking for. So let me see if I can do this way now. So we're going to go here. We're going over here. We're going here. Going here. Desktop 4. I wonder where that's at. Let's go. Pages needs to be. Oh, pages needs to be open. That's the problem there. Hang tight. Good thing about making plenty of mistakes is I know what to do. Okay, here we go. Okay, so now, is it going to move? So if I take, so view in, hold on, view in pages. Oh, I gotta turn it on. Okay. That is not the same. Stinker. Ah, oh, that's not good. Why can't I see it? Oh, no, that's still it. Okay, so I am going to have to just talk you through this. I don't know what else to do. Okay, so I'm looking at a really cool screen. And what I'm looking at is, hold on here. Let's go back over here and take away if you can't see what I'm seeing, I'm just going to walk you through it. Okay, so here's what I was trying to show you is in the workbook that comes with Keto Continuum, there are several spots where Michelle got stuck. And as I coach people through Keto Continuum 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. In fact, I think, yeah. Keto Continuum 1 through 12. I can show you this just up close to the, yeah. So where she was she got into Keto Continuum number 5 and 6. And this is where the hours of when she was eating was supposed to be 8 hours. It wasn't, I mean, this was a new habit for her. She has several of these tempting problems that are around her situation as well, where she has kids to feed at night. She has a universe of people that were depending on her in the evening, and that was her most vulnerable time. This is really common for moms, dads, but also just busy working people, is that to stop eating earlier in the night was something we were trying to get her to do. But essentially the only time she could stop eating really strictly was when she was fasting. So she was really good at no. I mean, she's fasting, she's 48 hours. The family was really good at that. She could make it 48 hours with salt, black coffee. Rarely was there a time where she even used BHB for those first 3 or 4 times. It was when she would go back to eating that the problems showed up. And this is a common problem that I've had. I'll tell you, I worked the most. I will do this again next week. I will totally show you these. But if you haven't checked out the workbook, that's what's in the workbook, is that you don't just wake up with that skill to help her say, all right, the first thing I want you to do, and we went to Keto Continuum chart. I'm just going to make sure I have the right chart so that those of you that have the workbook will know which number to look for. So we got to Keto Continuum number it's chart number 5 is what I think it's called. And essentially what it does is I need her to have 7 consecutive days where the first calorie that goes into, so there's several charts in this workbook, but this is the place where people hone a skill that I don't think anybody's ever taught them before. And they are in a plateau and they instantly want to take it to a level of saying, oh, I'm going to fast longer or I'm going to fast more. Just remind you, Michelle, during that second 12 weeks, did a 72-hour fast perfectly. I think it was 3 times. The other times, it was only 48 hours of fasting. So it wasn't that she wasn't doing a good job fasting. It's that what was happening outside of her fasting time was a very common situation that I need you to relook at what you're doing for the 8-hour window of calories, the only calories that go in are during these 8 hours. So there's a chart in there that it doesn't have you check ketones. It doesn't have you look at your weight. It doesn't have you do any stinking thing except document the time of the first calorie of the day. And then you set a timer on your smartphone, on your watch, on the oven. I don't care. Somewhere you set a timer for 8 hours. And when that timer goes off, zip, no calories. And I need you to do that for 7 consecutive days. And as she thought about that, she's like, I really had tightened up my eating window to about 4 hours. But when I asked about that, she's like, well, but I still like that cream in my coffee, or I still have BHB, which if I have the least damaging for what her problem is and was, it's that she has an insulin that overproduces, which is what most people have had when they are ages into that keto continuum, when they are, ages into the insulin resistant. They've had the weight on for a while. She had several other signs of a high insulin, which was her high blood pressure that completely went off of the medications in the first, I think it took us about 7 weeks to get off the medications. And when you say, okay, she's got to this place, and then she flatlined. There was not a lot, her blood pressure didn't get worse, but it didn't get better. Her weight didn't get worse, but it didn't get better. She lost some inches. And then there were some awful things we found on her labs that I'm like, oh my goodness, because I didn't check the labs before she started because she had just been to the doctor. So there's a few things that I always check in a woman. And one of them was iron. And we'll get to that on another episode, but holy Hannah, like no wonder you're not getting such a joyful, robust response to some of those fasts, is you got some other things we're struggling with. So we're working on that, but it doesn't mean she isn't going to advance the chemistry for what's happening in her insulin sensitivity. So it is we did have some resources where I was able to get her a continuous glucose monitor over the last, like the final 3 weeks of the Keto Continuum, or the documentary, not the documentary, the second 12 weeks. So she's at 6 months. The last 3 weeks of the 6 months, she had a continuous glucose monitor in. And we did talk about that on the show, where she said, I fast, I do great, I get these wonderful numbers. And then I eat one meal and my sugars are high for 2 days. And really, it's not an uncommon problem. I see it very frequently that they don't have the ability to really pull down that glucose, because when they stimulate insulin, it shoots way up. So what did I do with Michelle? I sent her to this specific part of the workbook and said, all right, you need 7 consecutive days that your eating window really is. And I started it with 8 hours, but she quickly said, I think I can really do 6. So she set the timer for 6 hours. And then she's like, even just a couple of days in, she's like, oh, look at that. My ketones went right up. I mean, she'd been struggling with, I have these low ketones. My ketones are low. And instantly I know you're not hitting autophagy. You're not getting that advanced level because. And she's like, but I'm doing so good. And she was doing good. Just like anybody who writes in saying, it's not that you're not doing it right. It's that your insulin has a memory, and it's going to do what it's been doing. And I don't at all find fault with this. I just want you, the watchers, especially those advanced people who write in and say, I've been doing keto, I've been doing it just perfectly, I'm doing these fasts, and I'm still not losing weight. If I could give them a continuous glucose monitor, it costs like $700 to get one of those in a person who doesn't have diabetes. Even if they have diabetes, not all insurances do a good job of covering that. So as I look at just the luck that Michelle had to study herself. She has the same answer that most people do, is that when they eat and they've been insulin resistant, boom, that the sugars do not go back into that autophagy range. It is too high to stimulate the recruitment from fat, from that stored fat. And until she can really hone the times where her eating window is truly, and she picked 6 hours, and I think she might even in the last few days said, I think I can try 4. You can follow her on her Instagram to know where she's at with that, because she's been trying really to say, oh, so many people struggle with this. I'm like, be sure to put that out there and say, here's what I was doing wrong, here's what I'm doing better. And then look at her numbers. I mean, you don't have to guess if she's got autophagy, if she's recruiting fat from the stored areas of her body, because her ketones will rise. And so in the Keto Continuum, I actually think I can do this one. It's the keynote's working. It's just the other one that's not. So let me go here, and push here, and then play one more time, play. Okay, so I'm going to push this, go back over to this slideshow, because we are going to check a couple of things here. So yeah, looking over here, you don't go from Keto Continuum number 6. Let's see if I can go backwards. Is it going to let me go backwards? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so Keto Continuum number 6 is that 16.8. And then the number changes by 1, Keto Continuum number 7. And it says, now you only have an eating window of 1 hour. Folks, that does not happen overnight. It is on purpose that I condensed it to just those 2 steps, because this no man's land where you live is something that is a gradation. You start out at 16.8 thinking that's a really tight eating window compared to the 12 hours you used to have. And then, especially as I walk through David in the Keto Continuum book and say, you know what, David, you're all 4 of your hours that you're eating are at night. You've got to get this food in before the sun goes down. And as he moves his 4-hour eating window earlier into the day, oh, what a much better answer for his numbers. Excuse me. It was also a really significant improvement in his weight loss. It had stalled just like Michelle's. The sugars were high, and it didn't have a big improvement in, there were a couple other things David was struggling with, like the rest of his blood pressure, or that shin thumb print. When I say, who's ready for this? If I'm interviewing them in person, I will reach over and push my thumb into their shin. They usually say, ow, because I'm pushing pretty hard. And I'm looking to see, do they leave a dimple of inflammation in their shin? And it's one of the fastest ways for me to be able to say, how inflamed is the patient? I mean, there are some blood tests that I can do, but they really don't give me the fastest answer as that thumbprint. And I teach that in the book, and I teach that in the workbook. Let's see, I wanted to make sure I had a really great patient question come in on the neurons. And I'm just making sure I review the notes that I'm covering what she talked about. Okay, so as I go through the rest of this, so we've already talked about this, where Michelle had gone down to 72-hour fasting. So when I said, all right, I need you to find the place where we can succeed. So number 1, you got to have the 7 days in a row where you stay in calorie to calorie. It's practically the only time in the book that I mention calories, that I need you marking the first moment you swallow a calorie to the last moment you swallow a calorie. That's an eating window. When we talk about time restricted eating, this is the cycles of 24 or less than 36 hours. We switch that word to fasting when you get to 36 or more hours. That at first, Michelle had said she'd done a 36-hour, especially when they're keto adapted, it doesn't take them long to rise up into a 48-hour fast. And she was doing, and then she was trying to reach for that 72-hour fasting, and it was hard. It was hard for her. It's hard for a lot of people, but it is really hard when they're stuck in that on-off button where they just can't say no in their eating window as strictly as I wanted them to. So if you go back on her Instagram page, you'll see the last week, her numbers got much better when she tightened up that window. She said, okay, 4 hours is really 4 hours. And she has really, especially summertime, is a lot easier for her to manipulate the family's eating. Is she's like, I'm making this one meal. It's going to be in the middle of the day, so noon to 1, 2-ish. and I'm done eating by this time. I start my morning coffee at about 10 o'clock is when she likes it. She does like the fat in her coffee. And I said, that's okay. Just keep it in the 4 hours. Whatever you have before that needs to have no calories. So from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock is her 4-hour window that she's working on. And I think that's just in the last few days where she says, okay, now look what happened. And as we continue with this, we said, guess what? I don't want you fasting for 72 hours. It really is difficult. It does send kind of this chaos throughout her family, through my family, through lots of families. But as you circle back to what fits in her life, I really want you looking at how she takes that 4-hour window, lands it in the central part of the day. And then when she's fasting, I said, I would not do fast longer than 48 hours. 48 hours is still a very strong stress of your body. And if you're keeping that window tight during the other days, you do not have to launch it into that long of a fast. All right, so I have some questions that people have had. I want to answer them because they are very relative to what I'm talking about. So Cynthia Bronson said, please talk about maintenance and what numbers we should be looking for and how long to fast and how often. If we do a Dr. Boz ratio of 40, do we just start eating again? Okay, so very good question. So if you notice in the workbook, I did a couple of really important things, and that is I only allowed you 2 places to ever check your Dr. Boz ratio, especially when it sounds like Cynthia is one of my is an advanced ketoer. I'd want her to do a couple of things if she's struggling, and that is document what your first calorie is to the last calorie, and just really don't do it once. And that is really the difference between what Michelle does on Instagram, what I do on Instagram, and what I learn when patients come in with their workbooks is you can't see your own pattern when it's scattered over the internet. You're going to always, if you're most people, you're going to remember favorably for yourself. So that documentation, Cynthia, of what's your first calorie, what's your last calorie, and then looking that maintenance is about how well did you stress your system. So there's a couple things that I want, Michelle is not in maintenance yet. So I'll tell you when we go from talking, are you in maintenance or are you not in maintenance? Number one, you don't get in maintenance till you are an ideal body weight. Again, body mass index has a range. People get all wigged out about body mass index and having they find fault with it, but it is still one of the top predictors of insulin resistance. So who is the ketogenic diet for? I think anybody who's aging who wants to slow that down or reverse it. But also, when you look at the people who say I'm in maintenance and I see them and they're still 20 to 30 pounds overweight, I don't say maintenance until you're in the ideal body weight zone. That's the green zone for any of my slides that you've seen. You can Google body mass index, do your height, weight, and find, are you in the green zone? If you're not in the green zone, then I want you doing what Michelle has done. Number one, document that you start the calorie and stop the calorie in a window, and you are good at that before you add a fast. It is really easy for adding fasts. I crutch with fasts as well. I'm in the green zone for my body mass index, but I am just barely. I should be about 15 pounds less. And I swear to God, when I'm done moving, I'm going to reach this goal. But I can't add one more thing to where the stress level is in my life right now. So how do I maintain? I push for a 72-hour fast every week, or at least a Dr. Boz ratio under 20. I do know that when maintaining, so I don't let people go to maintenance until they're in the green zone. And then the other thing that I'm really careful about when they are saying I want to maintain is how many prescription meds they're on. Again, this is one of my life goals. I really do believe you can decrease the amount of prescriptions that are, I'm an internal medicine doctor. This is what we do is we write prescriptions. If it's kind of like a matching game. If you have this symptom, I have this med. If you have this symptom, I have this med. And then I have you on 15 of them. Reversing that is cleaning up the cellular level. And that's what autophagy is. That's, the title of this was, at least the first session was that you have stalls in weight loss. You have plateaus in where people are at, and that can be maintenance. But what you really need to be talking about is how well autophagy has been stimulated and how well you're keeping that active and cleaning up your cells over time. So as I look at questions like Cynthia's, where she says, what do I do for maintenance? Number one, I have them find where that eating window fits for them. If you're saying, I hit a Dr. Boz ratio because I had some autoimmune things, because I'm still trying to clean up my, people write in and saying, what skin products do you use? I'm like, no, I reach autophagy every week. And this didn't show up overnight. You go back 3 years ago and watch, what did my skin do? It has to do with that constant sense of cellular debris being shuffled up and moved away. And that is what the Dr. Boz ratio is trying to approximate, is by lowering the glucose and raising the ketones. That Dr. Boz ratio of 40 is a good marker. But just like I was saying a minute ago, there are 2 places that I allow people to judge that. If you got a Dr. Boz ratio at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's just a typical day, I don't count that. You can really play with the numbers and have a flex of what your system is doing. The best measurement for for really knowing if you've got the right numbers is morning fasting numbers. So in the book I write, don't get off the toilet until you prick your finger and check your, Dr. Boz ratio, your glucose and your ketones. And in the workbook, I say, even if you're using urine ketones, the second void of the day, the second time you empty your bladder for the day, show what that number is. The first one, you really stored up all that waste overnight, and so it's not nearly as accurate. The second urination of the morning, you can check your urine ketone, your ketone strips. But the morning numbers are the most important for approximating, are you getting to autophagy? I mean, I can drink BHB like I've been through this show, and I can watch my numbers flux. That's not a real autophagy number. That's a great way for me to start my fast. It's a great way for me to show you I really care that you check your numbers. It's going to suppress my appetite. I'm going to get home, and even if my husband's favorite dessert is in our kitchen because it was accidentally Father's Day today, I'm not going to be tempted to eat it. It really does suppress your appetite, but it's not an autophagy number. The autophagy number comes when my morning fasting numbers reach at least a Dr. Boz ratio below 40, and hopefully below 20. I really like to hit a 20 in my fasting as well. So I would push you to go check out Michelle's follow-up of this. And all right, I'm going to check my numbers here, and then we're going to give away the books, which I forgot to do 2 weeks ago. And so somebody says, I still have dawn effect in the AM, so I measure numbers before my first meal. Stephanie, I would not do that. So that is as if to say that the dawn effect doesn't count. And what you want is the dawn effect is what we're trying to get better. That when you've been stimulating your cortisol, the cortisol comes as that morning sunrise comes up, and it stimulates your liver, and out of your liver flows all of this glucose. You say, oh, no, I don't want to look then. I'm like, yes, you do. You want to measure how much of that stored glucose is impacting your chemistry. And when people say, I want to reach into maintenance, and they're still 20 pounds overweight, I'm like, you're not in maintenance phase. You are in keep that eating window during the daylight hours. Keep that eating window strict, that you have, from calorie to calorie. Nothing goes outside of that. Not eating, not creaming your coffee. It is a strict time of nothing else outside that. I have salt. I have black coffee, water. Again, failing upwards. If you look at the literature, the BHB is still one of the best places if you're going to look for what's the best thing to have outside that window. It's put ketones in, let your mitochondria burn through the ketones. It is more than just energy. It is a signaling agent for what will happen tomorrow. And that's a fun thing to keep your eye on as well. So I wouldn't skip and say, oh, I don't look at dawn effect. I think you're just not looking at the problem. If you really want to know what your metabolism is, keep those numbers first thing in the morning. And the workbook forces you to document these at the right time. I mean, you can obviously not do what the workbook says. But if you're trying to say, I don't understand, how do I progress through this? That process of advancing you one step at a time is, and the workbook came from hundreds of patients that I've seen saying, I need you to show me the pattern of what you're doing. And that pattern doesn't show up when they say, but here's my continuous glucose monitor and it measures my Dr. Boz ratio. And I'm like, no, you're giving me numbers on this screen and we're scattering them all over our conversation. What I need to see is what were they at what time and what was the pattern over the last 2 weeks that maybe you didn't check it every morning. You don't have to check it every morning. Your metabolism isn't going to change that much in 24 or 48 hours. It is a general process that gets better and better, or worse and worse, over time. And as I look at these worksheets and I look at these charts, it's not me that has to recognize the pattern. It's the patient who will then say, just like Michelle says, oh, look at that. If I don't eat after 2 o'clock, bam, my numbers look so much better the next day. And that's hard. That's really hard. But as she looks at trying to say, how can I take that performance of her mitochondria to the next level? I don't know if you guys took the community poll before this live, but I put out there saying, when you've stalled, what have you done? And some people say, I haven't figured it out. Some people, I said, could look at and say, what is the, so they added fasting was one of them. One of them did time restricted eating. And then the next one was, exercise or sauna. So if you say, well, I'm really doing the most I can do. Like, again, in Michelle's world, I've said, just leave it at 4 hours, but be strict about those 4 hours. And don't take your fasting to 40 to 72 hours. It's really stressful on the family and all the other things. Keep those two the way it is. And if you want to add a stress, sweat, whether that's exercise or sauna, those things are taking that mitochondria to the next level. And that too is your metabolism improving. So, all right. So I think we've got several good answers there. I'm going to check my numbers here really quick, and then we are going to give away some books. Again, these are 4 of the audiobooks. So as I do this, your gut muscles are atrophied. I wonder what they're saying there. Let me see here. I can't understand what that person's saying, so I shouldn't join in on that one. Hold on. All right, so I'm pricking my finger here, and let's see. Ooh. Oh, I hate it when it doesn't do a good prick. I'm gonna have to do it again. Okay, there we go. All right, so I got a little drip, double drip now. And this is my ketones. That takes about 10 seconds to measure. I do want you to know that ForaCare has just come out with a uric acid strip, which is another one of the metrics that I measured in Michelle. Another one of those long-termers that I really do make a big difference on. So again, my ketones at the beginning of the show were 0.1. Now they're 0.5. And I really just drank most of my ketones in the last 10 minutes too. My glucose is about the same as it was at the beginning of the show. What I'm showing you there is I check my numbers too. Okay, this isn't a guessing game. This is what I really like about the ketogenic journey is you don't have to guess. You don't have to be as strict as I am. But if you want outcomes and if you want to improve, it's not a race. It really is this methodical approach of saying, stress that mitochondria a little further. And then measure it at the right times where we can make an assumption about what your cellular health or your metabolic health is doing. All right, so I'm going to flip over and give you my keto. Yeah, so here we go. All right, so a couple things that I just want you to also say is I continue to appreciate and read the book reviews. I am an independent author. I didn't plan on this, but I will tell you, I learned so much about people leaving book reviews. So when people say, I just want to say thank you, like the best way is leave me a book review. Pretty please leave me a book review. The audiobooks are recorded by me. I'm the narrator on both of them. And the only place that you can buy the workbook, actually, that's not true. You can buy the workbook at any bookstore now, or Amazon, but there's no audio book for the workbook. So, all right. So here's the workbook. Share what's going on in the workbook. If you buy nothing else, the workbook is going to walk you through exactly what my patients do in that journey. So you don't have to come see me. I like seeing patients, but there's so many. All right, here's the audiobook for Keto Continuum for the global market. L2R-TYJS-DEKHL7. And finally, United States Keto Continuum audiobook Q5KJ9FG7TXW5. Well, that is a wrap for tonight. And again, I appreciate the forgiveness on some of the hiccups, but this is a really important message. And I will be following up with some of those neurons inside that Facebook page to just make sure that I have, that's a good question. Actually, somebody just wrote in that I have answered those questions, because it is still distracting to be to say, did I get it? Did I answer what she was asking? All right. So, let's see. So Harvey asks, thanks, Dr. Boz. Does MCOM at USF come into the equation? I think okay. So I'm trying to think of what MCOM is. It's like metabolic something. Metabolic conference. USF is not what I went there for, but I will tell you, I am not sad that that's going to be in my hometown coming up in a couple of weeks here. So yes, there are several things we are working. Oh, yay! Thank you for telling me. Bonnie just won the keto book. Yes, that's so good. Thank you. When you look at some of the people that, for those of you that are still on, you have to be fan groupies at this point. So a couple things that people have written in and asked me about is, what made you pick Tampa? And honestly, I let my husband pick. So I'm licensed as a physician in South Dakota, in Texas, in New York, and Florida. And I said, all right, pick one of those places. Find a place you want to live. And our kids are getting to that stage where they'll all be out of the house. Our youngest is about to be a sophomore in high school. And we are hoping to live in a place where they want to come visit, not have to come visit. And as wonderful as South Dakota is, yes, that's the college. It's at University of South Florida. Yes, thank you for answering that. Not sad that it's right there. I'm very happy, but I don't know if it's going to, I don't know how it's going to work out. I have no relationships with any professionals in the city of Tampa. I'm really hoping that people show up to my support group, because that's one of the things where I practice content. Michelle's story was such a wonderful teaching environment for the people who showed up in Sioux Falls. And like I said, the biggest gift that I think she's receiving is to pass the baton for her to run a group here in South Dakota that will give her the keys to health for a lifetime. And I think she'll be great. All right, everybody, we are signing off. Again, for those of you still watching, this is a blessing. I will be doing this. Even though I'm moving across the country, I'm still trying to do lives every Sunday. I really enjoy these. I look forward to just sharing stories with you. I've got probably 200 stories that I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to tell them all, but I'm trying to use Sunday nights as a place where I tell a story about a neuron, or a story about a patient that I've struggled with, or they're working on, and they have a teachable moment. And these seem to be one of the most important reasons that my advanced viewers, the folks who show up on Sunday nights, that they really love it. So I am thinking of you, and I hope that you all have an awesome week, counting down to Father's Day. And I'm not making that dessert again. All right, everybody. I will see you next week.